Life as the eldest wasn't easy, especially with Claire as my little sister. From the get-go, she knew how to play her cards right. I guess you could say I was always in the background, just Elizabeth, the responsible one, and there was Claire, always ready to stir up trouble. It was Dad's 40th birthday, and Mom had gone all out with the decorations and made his favorite cake, cherry-topped with thick vanilla frosting. The whole family buzzed with excitement, and relatives were spilling in and out, filling the house with laughter and chatter. I was busy helping Mom in the kitchen, while Claire was probably plotting her next mischief. "Liz, can you take this to the table?" Mom said, handing me a tray of appetizers. When I walked into the living room, my heart sank. The right side of the cake was a mess, cherry toppings missing and frosting smeared. And there was Claire, an innocent look plastered on her face. It didn't take a genius to figure out what happened, but before I could say a word, Claire pointed at me. "Liz did it. I saw her, Mom." I stood frozen, the accusation hitting me like a slap. "What? No, I didn't. Why would I?" Mom came rushing in, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Elizabeth, how could you? Apologize right now." "But Mom, it wasn't me," I protested, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "I don't want to hear it. Go to your room. You're grounded, young lady." I trudged upstairs, the injustice of it stinging more than any punishment could. Later, Claire crept into my room, a smug look hiding just under her feigned sympathy. "Tough luck, sis. But hey, I can make it up to you," she whispered, pulling a crumpled $5 bill from her pocket. "Take this and we're even." "Even? You lied. Why should I cover for you?" I was seething but curious about her confidence. "Come on, Liz. It's easy money. Just grab that envelope in Dad's office I told you about earlier, and bring it to me. Easy peasy." Her plan was simple and tempting in a twisted way. The envelope was supposedly some paperwork she wanted to sneak a peek at, nothing more. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Sneaking the envelope to Claire felt wrong, but I was already painted the villain. What more did I have to lose? The next morning, the hammer dropped harder than I could have imagined. Dad was raging, the envelope in his hand. It wasn't just papers, it was cash. Cash meant for paying some of the bills. "Elizabeth, how could you steal from us?" Dad's voice boomed through the house. "I didn't. It was." "Save it. We found this in your room," he interrupted, his disappointment cutting deeper than the anger. Claire walked away scot-free, and I was left to stew in my room, grounded and betrayed. I vowed then never to let her sweet-talk me into anything ever again. High school was a mixed bag for me, and while I buckled down on studies, Claire threw herself into every party she could find. As graduation neared, the gap between us grew wider. One evening, I was knee-deep in college application forms when Claire barged into my room, reeking of smoke and something sweet that I couldn't place. Her eyes were too bright, her smile too forced. "Liz, you gotta loosen up. Why don't you come out with me tonight? There's a killer party down at Jake's place. You could use some fun," she cajoled, flicking her hair back in that carefree way she always did. I looked up from my papers, irritated. "Claire, not everyone's idea of fun is getting wasted on a school night. Some of us have actual plans for the future." Claire's face hardened, and she leaned in close. "Just watch, Liz. I'll make it big without any stupid degree. I don't need to waste my time like you do." Time passed, and our choices post-high school reflected our heated exchange that night. I got into college, moved to a city with a reputable landscape architecture program, and started carving out a niche for myself. Claire, true to her word, skipped college. Last I heard, she'd taken off to another city with a questionable crowd, chasing who knows what. Mom and Dad tried to bridge the gap between us, urging me to reach out to Claire. "Elizabeth, have you heard from your sister recently?" Mom would ask during our weekly calls, hope tinged with worry in her voice. "No, Mom. Claire hasn't called. Did she reach out to you?" I'd reply, knowing full well she hadn't. She's your only sister, Liz. Maybe you should try talking to her, mend things. Dad would chime in, his voice always a mix of frustration and concern. I sighed, feeling the old weight of being the responsible one. I'll try, Dad, but you know Claire. She does what she wants. While I built my academic and eventual professional credentials, Claire became a nomad of sorts. Her life a series of adventures and misadventures relayed through rare, cryptic social media updates that did more to mystify than inform. Then came the inheritance from Grandma, a blessing that felt like a lifeline. I poured that money into starting my own business, a landscape design firm. It was a dream come true, turning soil and seeds into serene escapes. Meanwhile, Claire's sporadic text showed pictures from beaches and bars, her wild, carefree existence a stark contrast to my structured days. My landscaping business was blooming, and I was deep in the green, literally and figuratively. With every shrub I planted and every garden I designed, I felt more anchored, more at home in my world. One busy Tuesday, as I was hauling bags of mulch across the nursery, I first met Michael. He came in wearing a plain white tee and jeans, a resume in hand, looking every bit out of place among the flora. "Hi, are you Elizabeth? I'm Michael. Hear about the job?" His voice was clear, his handshake firm. "Yes, that's me. You're a bit early for your interview, but that's all right. Let's talk as we work. You can help me with these bags," I said, motioning towards the pile of mulch. We talked as we worked, his ease with physical labor apparent. He wasn't just some guy, he was someone who knew his way around a garden, his knowledge deep, not just fluff. His simplicity was refreshing. No airs about him, just a genuine love for the earth and what it could yield. By the time we finished setting up the new floral display, I was more than convinced about him. "You're hired, Michael. Can you start tomorrow?" His grin was as wide as the horizon. "Absolutely, wouldn't miss it for the world." Over the next few months, Michael became more than just an assistant. He was a confidant, a co-conspirator in all things green and growing. Our lunch breaks often turned into brainstorming sessions, or just times to laugh over spilled seeds or a particularly stubborn patch of earth. It was during one of these lunch breaks that things shifted. We were sitting on an old wooden bench, sharing a pizza. "You know, Liz, I've been thinking," Michael started, his tone a bit more serious than usual. "Yeah? What about?" "If it's about that weedy patch by the fence, I'm all ears," I joked, trying to keep things light. He chuckled, then turned to me, his eyes steady. "No, not that. About us. I mean, I like working here, with you. A lot. And I was wondering if you maybe feel the same?" His words hung in the air, mingled with the scent of pine and fresh earth. It was one of those moments, the kind where everything seems to pause. "Michael, yeah, I do. I really enjoy having you around too," I admitted, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. "Good, that's good. So, do you think we could, go out sometime? Not as boss and employee, but just as us?" I laughed, more out of relief than anything. "I'd like that. Let's do it." "Great. It's a date then," he said, his smile making me feel like everything was just as it should be. A year later, we got married. It was a simple ceremony, just close friends and family in a small garden we both loved. Standing there with Michael, exchanging vows beneath the arch of blooming jasmine, I felt a sense of completeness. Just when you think you've got life somewhat figured out, it throws a curveball. Mine came in the form of an unexpected call from my mom. "Liz, guess who's back? Your sister Claire. She's here and wants to see you," Mom said, her voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. "We're having dinner tonight. You and Michael should come." That evening, Michael and I drove to my parents' house. The familiar landscape rolled by, but my stomach twisted with every mile closer to what felt like stepping back in time. Walking up to the door, Michael squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "Not really. But let's get this over with," I muttered, trying to plaster on a smile as we rang the bell. The door swung open, and there was Claire, as radiant and charming as ever, a stark contrast to the knot of anxiety I felt inside. Liz, look at you, all successful and married," Claire exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt more for show than out of affection. "And you must be Michael. I've heard so much about you." Dinner was a lavish affair. Mom had pulled out all the stops, and Dad was unusually quiet, watching the interactions with a hopeful eye. Claire was in full charm mode, laughing a little too loudly at Michael's jokes and keeping the conversation dangerously close to the topic of my business. "So, Liz, how's the business going? Must be good, huh? Working with all those fancy clients and big projects," Claire said, a gleam in her eye that I didn't trust. "It's going all right, lots of hard work as usual," I replied, playing down the details. "Oh come on, don't be modest. Mom told me you landed some big contracts." "That's amazing. You must be making a killing," she pushed, her curiosity poorly veiled. I shrugged, trying to steer the conversation away. "It pays the bills. So, what have you been up to, Claire?" "It's been years." "Oh, this and that. Travel, fun, living life, you know how it is," she said vaguely, waving her hand dismissively. Dad chimed in, possibly trying to smooth things over. "Claire's thinking of settling down here, starting fresh. It's a good thing, having both my girls in the same town." I forced a smile, catching Michael's wary glance from across the table. The evening dragged on, with Claire's questions about my business becoming more pointed and persistent. I felt like I was being interviewed rather than catching up with family. As we said our goodbyes, Claire pulled me aside. "Really, Liz, if you ever need a hand or want to talk shop, just give me a call. Family should stick together, right?" Her words, meant to comfort, felt more like a warning. As Michael and I drove home, the silence in the car was heavy. "Heads up, Liz. I don't trust her. There's something off about how she was digging into the business details," Michael finally said, breaking the silence. "I know," I sighed, leaning back in my seat. "Something's not right. But we'll figure it out. We always do." The day I won the City Park tender was supposed to be the best day of my career. It was a massive project, one that promised not just financial rewards but a real stamp on the map for my business. I was buzzing with excitement when I called Michael. "Hey, babe, guess what? We won. We actually won the tender." I almost shouted into the phone, unable to keep the thrill out of my voice. "That's incredible, Liz. I knew you'd nail it. We need to celebrate. How about that concert tonight, and maybe a drink after?" Michael's voice matched my excitement. The concert was everything we needed. The band was one of our favorites, a perfect backdrop to our celebratory mood. As the last song faded out and the crowd began to disperse, I realized I needed a quick bathroom break before heading out for drinks. "I'll just run to the ladies' room. Meet you right here?" I told Michael, pointing to a spot near the exit. When I stepped out, Michael was nowhere in sight. I scanned the crowd, my heart starting to race. Had he gone ahead? No, he wouldn't do that. I pulled out my phone to call him, but then I paused. Up ahead, on a dimly lit path, I saw him. But he wasn't alone. He was with someone, a woman. My pace quickened as I moved closer, trying to see who it was. Then, as they stepped into a patch of moonlight, my heart sank. It was Claire. What the hell? I ducked behind a tree, my mind racing. This couldn't be right. Not Claire. Not Michael. Yet there they were, laughing, too close, too intimate. Then, they kissed. It felt like a punch to the gut. I fought the urge to run out, to scream. Instead, I pulled out my phone, switched it to record, and edged closer. I could hear them now. Claire's voice, silky and mocking. So, the big contract finally came through. She's a bloody fool, isn't she? Thinking this was all her big break. Michael's reply was a low chuckle. Totally in the dark. Once the money's in her account, we can make our move. It'll be easy to transfer it out before she even notices. Mexico, here we come. Poor Liz, always so trusting. Just like when we were kids, huh? Claire was almost purring. They parted with another kiss, and Claire sauntered off, while Michael checked his phone. Panic flickered across his face when he saw the time. He turned and started back towards the concert venue, right towards where I was supposed to be waiting. I slipped the phone into my pocket and stepped out from behind the tree, my heart hammering. As I walked towards the exit, I spotted him looking around, a fake frown of concern on his face. "Liz, there you are. I was getting worried," he said, reaching out to me. I looked up at him, keeping my face as neutral as possible. "Sorry, got a bit turned around. Let's go have that drink, shall we?" The walk to the bar was a blur. My mind was racing, piecing together months, no, years of lies. The tender, the late nights, the sudden trips Michael, it all made sense now. We sat at the bar, and Michael toasted to our success. To us, Liz. To our future. I forced a smile, my hand tight around the phone in my pocket. To us, I echoed, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. The morning after the concert, I was up early, troubled thoughts robbing me of sleep. Michael was still asleep, his breathing even and calm, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. I slipped out of bed and headed to my home office. First, I logged into my company's bank account. What I found made my stomach turn. There were dozens of small transactions, siphoning off amounts just under the threshold that would trigger a notification. Then, I checked my personal account. The same pattern. Money, my money, leaking away like water through cracks. Michael had access to both accounts, he was the only other person who could have done this. I needed to act, but cautiously. If Michael suspected I was onto him, he might accelerate his plans, whatever they might be. I decided not to confront him, not yet. Instead, I phoned an old college friend who now worked as a forensic accountant. "Hey, Tom, it's Liz. I need a favor, a big one. Can you do a discreet audit of my accounts? Both personal and business. It's urgent." Tom's voice was grave when he replied. "Sure, Liz. I can start today. But what's going on? You sound serious." "Just problems. I'll explain later. Thanks, Tom." I hung up and sat back, my mind racing. For the next 2 weeks, I had to keep up appearances. The thought of acting normal around Michael twisted my gut, but I had no choice. 2 days later, Tom called me with the preliminary results. "Liz, it's not looking good. There are irregularities all over the place. It's like someone's been consistently skimming off the top. You were right to be suspicious." Hearing it so plainly hit hard. "Can you compile everything? I might need it soon." "Of course. I'll get everything organized. Liz, be careful, okay?" I promised I would, hanging up with a heavy heart. A couple of days later, I received an email from Tom. Armed with the audit results and the damning recording, I knew it was time to bring in heavier reinforcements. My hands were shaking as I dialed Mark, a classmate from high school who had since become a cop. "Mark, it's Liz. Elizabeth Miller. I need help, and it's pretty serious." There was a pause on the line before he responded, his voice cautious but concerned. "Liz? What's going on? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "No, not really. I've uncovered something. It's a long story, but it involves fraud, my husband, and my sister. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe away from prying eyes." I felt like a character in a bad crime drama as I laid out the documents and played the recording for him. Mark listened, his expression growing darker by the minute. "This is serious, Liz. Based on what you've shown me, and this recording, it's solid evidence. But catching them in the act would make it airtight. It could ensure they don't just wiggle out on a technicality." I nodded, the reality of the situation settling in. "What do you suggest?" "Keep things normal. Act like you don't suspect a thing. We need to catch them transferring the money or making a move against you. The next few days were a masterclass in acting. I smiled and nodded, played the doting wife, and the oblivious sister. I saw the looks Michael and Claire exchanged, loaded with secrets and plans. A week later, the payment for the city park project hit my company's account. It was a large sum, the largest I'd ever handled. I called Mark right away. "It's in. The money's in the account. They're going to make their move soon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Good. From now on, we'll monitor the accounts closely. If they make a move, we'll be ready." I watched Michael that evening, observed him fiddling with his phone, probably checking the account, plotting his next steps. Later, in bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Michael's breathing. It was almost hard to believe that this man, the man I'd loved and trusted, was plotting against me. Meanwhile, Claire had orchestrated the farewell dinner under the pretense of celebrating a new chapter in her life. As I walked into my parents' house, the atmosphere was buoyant, almost surreal in its cheerfulness. "Liz, you made it." Claire greeted me with her typical flair, a wide grin plastered across her face. "I have some big news. I've met someone wonderful, and we're planning to get married. We're even talking about moving to a resort to live out our dream life." My parents beamed at her, their joy palpable. "Oh, Claire, that's wonderful. Tell us more about him." I sat quietly, forcing a smile as Claire wove a tale about her new, mysterious beau. Her descriptions were vague, deliberately skipping over any details that could link directly back to Michael. Just as Claire was elaborating on her fabricated love story, the front door burst open. Michael stormed in, his face flushed with anger and panic. "Liz, why can't I access any of the accounts? What the hell is going on?" he bellowed, his eyes wild. The room fell silent. My parents looked from Michael to me, confusion written all over their faces. Claire's facade slipped for a moment, revealing a flash of fear. I stood up, my voice calm but icy. "Because, Michael, I know everything. I know about your plans with Claire. About the money, about the lies." I pulled out my phone and hit play. The recording of their conversation under the dim lights of the park filled the room. Claire's scheming words, Michael's complicit laughter, it all echoed off the walls, stark and undeniable. My parents turned pale, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror. Michael and Claire made a move towards the door, a pathetic attempt to escape what was coming. At that moment, the police, led by Mark, entered the house. "Michael Turner, Claire Miller, you are under arrest for attempted fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The officers handcuffed them. Michael's plea was pitiful. "Liz, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Forgive me." I looked at him, at the man I once loved, and felt nothing but revulsion. "There's nothing to forgive. You made your choice." After the police and the chaos had left, the house was painfully quiet. My father looked at me, his eyes brimming with tears. "Liz, we're so sorry. We should have seen it. All those years, blaming you." "It's okay, Dad. It's over now," I said, though I knew the healing would take much longer than just tonight. The courtroom was cold, sterile. My heart was pounding as I sat there, waiting for the final verdict on Michael and Claire. I wasn't alone, my parents were there, it seemed they aged years in these past weeks. As the judge entered, everyone rose, the tension in the room thick enough to cut. We all sat down as he began to speak, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. "The court hereby sentences both defendants to 5 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 3 years, based on behavior and restitution payments." The judge's words were like a physical relief, a burden lifting that I hadn't fully acknowledged I was carrying. The drive home was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts. When we arrived, the sight of the garden, lush and vibrant, was a stark contrast to the morning's events. I took a deep breath, the familiar sense grounding me. "Why don't we have dinner together tonight? At home. Just us." I suggested, longing for the simplicity of a family meal. That sounds perfect, honey, Mom said, relief in her voice. As they went inside, I lingered in the garden, my sanctuary. I touched the leaves, the petals, reminding myself of the growth and life that continued, relentless and beautiful despite the harshness of the world.